What if I told you that every single dollar in your bank account, every Bitcoin in your wallet, and every stock certificate you own is nothing more than a fancy IOU for something humanity stopped handing out centuries ago? If you want to understand where money really comes from and why the wealth gap keeps growing no matter what politicians promise, then smash that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to show you will change how you see every financial decision for the rest of your life. Here's something nobody talks about in economics class. Money is basically a participation trophy for people who couldn't get their hands on the real prize. And what's the real prize? Dirt, soil, ground, land. I know that sounds insane in 2024 when we're all obsessed with AI stocks and cryptocurrency. But stick with me, because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you think. See, we're living in a world where everyone's chasing the next big investment. People are pouring life savings into NFTs, meme coins, and tech startups that don't even have a product yet. We've convinced ourselves that wealth is this abstract, digital thing floating in the clouds somewhere. But here's the uncomfortable truth that the ultra-wealthy already know. At the end of every financial boom, the smart money runs back to the same place it's been running for 5,000 years. Real estate, property, land. Not because it's exciting, not because it's innovative, but because it's the only thing that's actually real. Let me take you back to where this whole story begins. Picture ancient Egypt. The pyramids are already old. The Nile floods every year like clockwork, and when those waters recede, they leave behind rich, black soil that grows more food than anywhere else on Earth. Now, the pharaohs weren't stupid. They didn't fill their treasure rooms with pretty rocks and shiny metal just for fun. They understood something fundamental. Gold is worthless if you're starving. What they actually hoarded was land rights. Miles and miles of floodplain, because whoever controlled the soil controlled the food, and whoever controlled the food controlled the people. Wealth wasn't measured in coins back then. It was measured in how many harvests you owned, how many acres bent to your will, how much of the earth answered to your name. This wasn't unique to Egypt either. Jump across the Mediterranean to Rome, and you'll find the same pattern, just supersized. The Roman Empire wasn't built on military genius or superior technology. It was built on a real estate grab that would make modern hedge funds jealous. Every time Rome conquered a new territory, the first thing they did wasn't build roads or temples. They divided up the land. Massive estates called latifundia were handed out like bonuses to generals and senators. Some of these properties were bigger than entire modern cities. And here's the kicker. These estates weren't just status symbols. They were the economy itself. You couldn't be a Roman citizen without property. You couldn't vote. You couldn't serve in government. You were basically invisible if you didn't own land. The poor weren't just broke. They were locked out of existence itself. Now, Rome eventually collapsed, right? The barbarians showed up, the empire crumbled, and Europe descended into what we call the Dark Ages. But here's what's wild. The money died, but the land system survived. In fact, it got worse. Medieval Europe perfected something we're still living with today, even though we pretend we're not. It was called feudalism, and it was brutally simple. The king owns everything. He loans chunks of it to nobles. The nobles rent it to knights. The knights let peasants work it, and everyone pays upward, forever. You could be born on a piece of land, work it your entire life, break your back making it productive, and still die owning absolutely nothing. Your grandchildren would be born into the same situation. Their grandchildren too. The system wasn't designed to be fair. It was designed to be permanent. And here's the part that should terrify you. It worked. For centuries, the vast majority of humanity lived and died without ever owning a square foot of earth. They rented their existence from people who inherited the right to charge them. Now, we look back at that and think, thank God we evolved past that nonsense. But did we? See, what happened next is that humanity got really good at hiding the same old system under new names. The Industrial Revolution rolled around, and suddenly we had factories and railroads and stock markets. Capitalism was born, and everyone celebrated because now you didn't need to be a noble to get rich. Except, how did those factories get built? On land.
How did banks decide who got loans? Based on land collateral. What did the first government bonds get backed by? Rents collected from land. The whole game just got a new paint job. The feudal lord became the landlord. The serf became the tenant. Same dependency, different vocabulary. And it gets even more interesting when you look at how modern finance actually works. Let's talk about mortgages for a second, because this is where it all comes together. The word mortgage literally comes from Old French. Mort means death. Gage means pledge. A death pledge. You're pledging your future labor, maybe your entire working life, for the right to claim a piece of land that you won't truly own until you're almost retired. Banks don't really make money from your paycheck. They make money from your need to exist somewhere on the planet. And the crazier housing prices get, the more profit they extract from that need. Right now, in 2024, the total value of all real estate on Earth is somewhere north of $380 trillion. Let me put that in perspective. That's more than all the stocks, bonds, and cryptocurrencies in the world combined. Think about that. Every innovation, every tech startup, every financial product ever invented, all of it, added together, is still worth less than the dirt we're standing on. This is why the Bitcoin story is so fascinating and so ironic. Bitcoin was supposed to be the escape hatch, right? A way to own something scarce that governments couldn't control, that banks couldn't inflate, that elites couldn't monopolize. Digital freedom, self-sovereignty, a new financial system. And for a while, it really looked like it might work. But then something funny started happening. The people who got in early, the ones who mined thousands of coins back when Bitcoin was worthless, they became the new landlords. They didn't break the hierarchy. They just teleported it into cyberspace. Now we've got Bitcoin whales who own more of the supply than entire countries. We've got exchanges that function like digital banks. We've got lending platforms that charge interest on crypto the same way feudal lords charged rent on fields. Even the language gives it away. Bitcoin mining, digital real estate, staking your claim. It's the same metaphor humanity has been using for 10,000 years, just wrapped in code. And you know what the really wealthy Bitcoin holders did when the price went up? They cashed out and bought actual real estate. Condos in Miami, mansions in California, ranches in Wyoming. Because deep down, everyone knows you can't live inside a blockchain. Here's where this gets personal for most people watching this video. If you're under 40, you've probably noticed that buying a home feels almost impossible now. Prices keep climbing, wages stay flat. The down payment you saved 2 years ago isn't enough anymore. You're told it's just market forces, supply and demand, economics 101. But that's not the whole story. What's actually happening is that land ownership has once again become a sorting mechanism, a way to separate the insiders from the outsiders. In cities like New York, London, Vancouver, and Sydney, entire apartment buildings sit empty, not because there's no demand, but because they're not really homes anymore. They're vaults. Wealthy individuals and corporations buy properties not to live in them, but to park money. They're storing wealth in physical form because they know something important. When markets crash, land survives. It always has. After the South Sea bubble in the 1700s, people ran back to land. After the stock market crash of 1929, the wealthy bought up property at bargain prices. After 2008, hedge funds turned foreclosed homes into rental empires. The pattern repeats because the fundamentals never change. Paper burns, currencies collapse, empires fall, but land just sits there, quietly accumulating value generation after generation. Now here's the really sinister part. The scarcity of land isn't entirely natural anymore. It's designed. Governments control how much land gets developed through zoning laws. Developers sit on empty lots waiting for prices to climb. Banks keep interest rates low enough to make mortgages look affordable, but high enough that you'll be paying them for 30 years. Every player in the system has learned how to protect the illusion of scarcity, because the moment land becomes truly affordable, the whole hierarchy collapses. Think about it. If everyone could afford to buy property, landlords would lose their leverage. Banks would lose their most profitable loan product. Governments would lose a major source of tax revenue. The system depends on most people renting, not owning. That's not a bug. That's the design. And it's not just happening in rich countries either. Right now, corporations and foreign governments are quietly buying up millions of acres in Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia.
We're talking about land purchases the size of entire countries. They're not doing this to build homes or help local communities. They're doing it to control resources, water rights, mineral deposits, future carbon credits, farmland for when climate change reshinks the globe. These aren't real estate deals, they're territorial claims on the future. And the people who actually live on that land, they're being pushed out, the same way peasants were pushed off common land during the English enclosures 500 years ago. Different century, same playbook. Because at the end of the day, power has always been territorial, not digital, not theoretical, but physical. So what does all this mean for you? It means that no matter how sophisticated our financial system gets, no matter how many layers of abstraction we add, the foundation is still the same. Land is the base layer of wealth. Everything else, stocks, bonds, crypto, fiat currency, is just a claim on future access to it. The people who understand this don't chase trends. They buy property. They accumulate assets that can't be printed, can't be hacked, and can't disappear when the Wi-Fi goes out. They know that true wealth isn't about having money. It's about controlling space, because space is where everything else happens. You can't build a factory without land. You can't grow food without land. You can't house a population without land. Even the most powerful tech companies in the world, Apple, Amazon, Google, measure their dominance not just in market cap, but in real estate footprint. Massive headquarters, data centers spanning acres, strategic property holdings around the globe. Because they understand what most people don't. No matter how digital the world becomes, control still requires dirt. History keeps trying to teach us this lesson, and we keep ignoring it. Every generation thinks they've invented something new, a better system, a fairer way to distribute wealth. But zoom out far enough, and you'll see the same cycle on repeat. First comes land ownership. Then comes credit expansion. Then comes a crash. And when the dust settles, the people who owned land before the crash own even more after it. The wealth doesn't disappear. It just changes hands, always flowing upward to whoever held real assets instead of paper promises. This happened after every major financial crisis in history. It's happening right now, and it'll happen again in the next one. Look, I'm not saying you should panic or give up on your financial goals. What I am saying is this: understand the game you're actually playing. When someone tells you to invest in stocks, ask yourself, what are those companies built on? When someone pitches you crypto as freedom, ask, where do the winners park their profits? When governments print more money, ask, what asset holds value when paper doesn't? The answer, every single time, leads back to the same place: land. Because they're not making any more of it. And as long as that's true, the people who control it will control everything else. The feudal lords never really went away. They just learned to call themselves investors. The serfs never escaped. They just got rebranded as tenants. And the system that sorted humanity into owners and renters 1,000 years ago, it's still running, right now, under every stock ticker and crypto chart you're watching. The only difference is that now, most people don't even realize they're playing the same game their ancestors lost. But you do. And that knowledge is the first step toward changing your position on the board. If this opened your eyes to something you've never thought about before, do me a favor. Subscribe to Monetary Archaeologist. Because I dig up the financial truths that history buried. And trust me, there's so much more to uncover. The past isn't dead. It's just wearing a new disguise. And once you learn to see through it, you'll never look at money the same way again.